My name's Todd Daniels. I work with Redmond Minerals, and I've been doing animal nutrition for a little over 20-some years. And we're out here in Montana today looking at some cattle grazing on some different types of pasture. What we're really wanting to talk to everybody about today is manure and manure scoring and what it can tell us about the animal nutrition and how that relates to overall animal health. Really just to give a little background on manure scoring, it kind of developed mostly through dairies. They wanted some way to quickly analyze and easily take a look at what those animals are doing in those confinement operations. And we just kind of take that similar information and apply it to range cattle. Kind of interestingly, I took manure samples, and had them analyzed on about 20 different ranches over a 10-year period, and we did those samples for about 6 times a year. It's a great way to really learn about your pastures and different management of each pastures and how they can be different, and also get a really good view of animal nutrition over time and over the year and how that changes and what you might need to do for supplementation or not do, in saving money. Those tools can be really helpful. One thing that we did recognize in doing that and all those samples that we did take, we don't necessarily know all the time what's going into that cow's mouth, but we can get a pretty good idea by looking at what's coming out and getting a fair evaluation of that. But another thing is we would go out and do a lot of clipping, and where we would just clip certain amounts of the pasture and then compare that back to the manure samples. And something that we found regularly was cattle are a lot more selective about their diet than what you might think you might clip out in the pasture. They adjust their diet accordingly to the needs, particularly on protein. They'll go find more nutritious plants out in the pasture. We might not notice, but they're definitely selecting those to offset some of the drier grasses and things as the year wears on. Back to just talking about manure samples and looking at it, it's a really simple thing to do. It's based on a scoring of 1 to 5, 1 being extremely loose and watery and undefined, and up to 5, which is a very segmented, hard stacking manure pile that can cause, you're getting into some issues with some nutrition things that you need to address. But this particular pasture that these cattle are in is some introduced species and alfalfa, kind of some old hayfield. So we're gonna see a little bit different manure out here in this field versus if they were out in these further pastures and these dry hills that are gonna be more native species and more what you might see in August in the upper plains and in central Montana. Because this alfalfa has a lot of protein content and it's got a little higher moisture value than say what's out in the hills, you can obviously see that these patties are very loose or getting pretty loose. They've been in here a couple of days, and so there's a little bit of a mix of drier forage that they're still probably passing through a little bit. The rate of passage isn't terribly high on the forages when they're out in these drier hills, so it takes a little while to clear them completely out. This would be probably like a manure score of 2. If it was a 1, it would be just a soup, and it would be splattering in all directions and really not have any definition whatsoever. This has some definition, but it's not stacking, but you can still see some of the grass fibers and forage fibers in there, but still kind of undefined and starting to fall apart, which that is coming both from the fact that this is pretty high protein content, which excess protein will loosen the manure up, and then also just the sheer moisture content that's out here versus some of the drier pasture. The excess protein, we need the protein to keep feeding the microbial population in the rumen and keep them digesting these dry forages out here. So the fact that there is a lot of good protein out here is great, because they will go and select on some of these drier grasses as well to offset that protein in there. And this alfalfa will help feed those bugs that then in turn break down all of that dry forage that's out there as well. Ideally, we're looking for 3 as a score. Oh, that looks like a cow patty, you know, it's perfectly round. It's not more than 2 inches deep. It's got a little indent in the middle a little bit. There's not a lot of really rough fiber seeing in it, but you can still see some, just not anything over, you know, a couple of inches. So that tells you that the microbial population is doing a good job of digesting the fiber that's in there. We're getting enough protein to them, keeping that bug population going and breaking that down. It also is telling us that she's ruminating really well, and she's continually breaking that down, and she's happy and healthy and functional as a grazing animal. As you go past a 3, then a manure score of 4, you're going to see some stacking. The manure piles will get more than a couple of inches high and really start seeing some really big fiber length, maybe over 2 inches, and that she's not ruminating quite as well as she could be, and those bug populations are definitely not efficient, and then they need nitrogen to keep them going and keep that population turning over and assisting with that fiber digestion. And then once you get to a 5, then you'll start seeing segmentation in that manure, where you actually see it breaking apart and it gets very stacked up, and you will see lots of fibers in that, and that is a definite sign of a need of protein supplementation. There are times you can go for lengths of time where you'll see that stacking and see that segmentation, and you can go for periods with that happening. As those cows, like later in the year, you get this time of year, you'll see some of it. Some cows are better at maintaining themselves and more efficient than others, and it's okay for a time, but eventually as that goes on, if it goes on for months, you will start seeing a decrease in body condition score. Maybe only, you know, in that first 30 days or 60 days, you might only drop a half a condition score, but it, you know, it can quickly build up on you, and then you're just coming back and trying to provide harvested forages to regain those losses. So if you can mitigate it to some extent in the beginning and while it's happening, that is best. But if it goes on for a period, you know, where you're seeing 4 and 5, fairly high stacking, some segmentation, making sure that there's good water availability, you have free choice water to those cattle, ensuring that that is being maintained, as well as a salt that they're going to, you know, and we use natural salt, so the intake is good, and they like it, and we're working with nature that way to provide that to them. But those are the 2 things, you know, of anything, to really make sure that you're always providing those 2 things, free choice all the time. These animals were out here grazing during the winter, not being supplemented. The old alfalfa and whatever regrowth was here last year that they were grazing on did provide some amount of protein, and this doesn't look very bad for, I guess, for an unsupplemented animal in the winter just out grazing dormant. There is some segmentation to it. You can see it a little bit as it's falling apart. It's not as bad and not as fibrous as you would think it would be without that protein. So these cattle were doing pretty good with existing alfalfa, and probably mixing that diet between the alfalfa and some of this older standing forage. But you can see that there was some segmentation to it, and maybe they weren't completely efficient. You know, it still looks pretty darn good for winter unsupplemented, and looks like they were doing pretty good. You'll see when they do need a lot more protein and more supplementation, that would stack up further, particularly get some real height to it, and also still be segmented. This has a little segmentation in it, but it's not stacking like you would normally see. I do believe that the alfalfa that was remaining out here and that was helping assist with some of that breakdown, and they were doing pretty good on it. Here's some older manure, and mostly I just want to show that it's real crumbly and falling apart, and you can see all of the little holes all over in it, and that is due to insect activity, dung beetles and things burrowing through it and breaking it down. you can just see that that is crumbling apart and really contributing to the organic matter that is for our soil. So we want to see that happening regularly. And here in Montana, where we live in a pretty dry environment, things don't break down very fast, and we need that bug population. We need those dung beetles and such to break this stuff down, or it stays for a really long time. But you know, we believe that healthy soils, healthy plants make healthy livestock, and this is what we need happening to the soil, and having that manure break down and provide that organic matter back to the soil, which feeds the soil microbes that are down there working to help grow all these great plants. So this is a great thing to see out here, and make sure that this is happening in your pasture and you're looking to see that happen. And the things that we're doing with our cattle for parasite control can really contribute to low amounts of beetles and other insects there to break that down and bring that back into your system to get that manure breaking down. It is a natural system and it works pretty darn good.